How's it going, everybody? We're in the second week of our series on change called Rooted. Last week, we talked about how we're all going to experience good and bad changes in our lives. It's unavoidable. But just like trees can stand firm when they're rooted in the ground, we can stand firm no matter what changes life brings us when we're rooted in God. How? Because God never changes. Before we get into what we're going to be talking about tonight, I want to tell you a quick story. Back when I was about to start the 9th grade, I started to play a game called Warhammer 40k with my friends from church. It's a tabletop sci-fi war game where you build an army of miniature plastic models and fight against other players and their armies. It's essentially the nerdiest thing on the entire planet, and I loved it. The cool part about Warhammer is that you get to build your models yourself. They come in small gray plastic pieces that you have to glue together, and then, after the model's complete, you paint it. It takes a long time and it's very expensive, but it's a really fun hobby. So one day, me and a few of my other friends went over to my friend Ben's house. Now, Ben had been playing Warhammer for years at this point, and we were basically just starting out. Ben was showing us some of the models that he had painted, and they were amazing. Ben actually went to many painting competitions and had even won a few with some of his models. Here's a picture that looks like one of the models that he had won one of the competitions with. It was his commander of his army called the Librarian. I asked him if I could hold it because I wanted to see all the intricate detail on this tiny model. But after he handed it to me, something terrible happened. A few seconds into checking it out, I let it accidentally slip out of my hand. It tumbled all the way down to the concrete floor of his basement. And as you can imagine, several perfectly painted plastic pieces bust and scatter across the floor. I freaked out. I just broke the prize-winning commander of his army. I picked up all the pieces and I tried to put it back together as best as I could, but it was no use. It had to be glued back together. But worse yet, a lot of the paint had chipped off, so the entire model would probably have to be repainted, and Ben would spend hours doing it. Thankfully, Ben didn't come down hard on me. He forgave me, and we moved on, but I still felt really bad about it. I wished I could have put it back together and fixed it for him, but I just couldn't. We are still friends to this day, but I'm just not allowed to look at his nice models anymore. Even if you've never broken something the way that I did, you probably know what it feels like to wish things could be fixed. In a way, I think change feels a lot like that sometimes. When something changes in a way that we don't want it to, it feels a lot like something has broken in our lives. And when that happens, often the first thing we try to do is fix it. We want things to go back to the way that they were. But the bad news is, a lot of times, that isn't possible. Sometimes change means that whatever it is that's broken simply can't be fixed. And that can leave us feeling sad, angry, frustrated, and even helpless. Have any of you seen that Pixar movie that came out a few years ago called Inside Out? Here's a quick reminder if you've seen it before, and if you haven't seen it yet, I'll just be pulling from the first few minutes of the movie so it won't ruin anything for you. In Inside Out, our main character is a girl named Riley. She's a pretty average kid with a nice childhood. She grows up, plays ice hockey, has a close friend, and a bunch of other good memories. Everything is great for Riley until her family moves from her hometown in Minnesota to San Francisco, California. It was a huge change for her, and as I'm sure you can imagine, it wasn't easy. She had to move away from her friends, move away from the lake where she loved to skate on, and move from a nice house with land to an inner city apartment. This change was also made a lot harder when she didn't make any new friends at school. All these changes left her feeling sad, scared, confused, and angry. If any of you have gone through a big change in your own life, you can probably relate to all the emotions that Riley felt when she tried to process this huge, unfixable change in her life. Maybe for you, it was a breakup with your boyfriend or girlfriend, and no matter how much you wanted to get back together, you knew it just wasn't going to happen. Or maybe your parents separated and you hoped that they would work it out and fix the relationship, but they ended up getting divorced instead. Maybe you used to be the star player on your team, but this year somebody else took that starting spot and there's nothing you can do to get it back. You can't change the fact that you moved to a new house. You can't change the fact that you have to go to a new school. You can't change the fact that you failed that test. You can't fix the changes that make your life feel a little bit broken right now. When you're going through changes like that, sometimes it feels like the end of the story. Maybe you've even wondered why God hasn't come in to fix what feels broken. Where you wish there was a next chapter, God closed the book. Where you wished there was a comma, God put a period on the end of that sentence. And instead of feeling rooted and safe, you felt frustrated and disappointed with a change that's so permanent in your life. You might even feel like you aren't rooted securely anymore. If you've ever felt like that, just know that you're not the only one. Almost every person that has ever experienced a difficult or painful change in their lives has thought the same thing. That's why it's important for us to know that while God hasn't promised to change everything the way we want him to, he has promised us something else. And when we know what that promise is and what it means for our lives, it'll be easier to stay rooted in him even when he doesn't fix the things we think are broken. In the Old Testament, which is a collection of books in the Bible written before Jesus came to earth, there is one main storyline that goes throughout almost all of the books. It's the storyline of God's relationship with the children of Israel. Through a man named Abraham, God created the nation or group of people of Israel in an area of the world that we now call the Middle East. It was through that group of people that God would one day send the world his son Jesus. So the nation of Israel was a really big deal to God. They were a part of his plan to free and save the whole world through Jesus. But this group of people had a problem. They kept breaking things, mainly their relationship with God. Even though God chose them for a really important thing, they still got caught up doing really selfish and stupid things that not only got them in trouble, but also went against God's plan. In fact, other nations would come in, take them over, and even capture them. This happened over and over again, and every time they got into trouble, guess what they did? They did what we would all probably do. They asked God to fix it. Sometimes he did, and sometimes he didn't. But no matter what God did with the changes the nation of Israel was dealing with, he did promise them something that they could hold on to. And it's the same thing he promises us. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. Now, one thing we can't skip over is the way this is worded. When you pass through the waters, when you pass through the rivers, when you walk through the fire. In other words, things are going to change. You will find yourself in a difficult time. That's a guarantee. It's not a matter of if you do, but when you do. So if that's true, what does God promise us when those things happen? He promises us that he will be with us. Now, I don't know if that's the type of promise you were hoping for from God. Honestly, sometimes I kind of wish God would have said something else too. Maybe something like, no matter how hurt you are or no matter how bad your situation is, I am going to fix it. I'm going to make things go back to the way they were, and it will all be great. But that's not what he said. And that makes me think maybe God knows something that we don't. Maybe he knows that more than we need things to be fixed, we need to know he is with us. And I think that's actually good news, because if change is going to happen, I want to know that God, who never changes, is going to be with me when it does. And that's what I want you to remember today. God is with you. No matter what you're going through, no matter what's happening at your home, no matter how hurt you feel over what your friends did to you, no matter how sad you are because life will never go back to the way that it was, God is with you. And if you think about it, that really is an amazing promise. Because when I'm hurting from the changes life has brought me, the last thing I want to feel is alone. I want to know somebody is going to be with me. Sometimes just knowing somebody is there for you can make you feel a lot better. And when that someone is God, who is bigger than anything else that's happening around us, well, that's the best feeling in the world. You see, I think that God's presence with us really is the answer we need. When God finally fulfilled his promise and sent Jesus into the world through the nation of Israel, one of Jesus' names was Emmanuel, meaning God with us. God wanted us to know that Jesus' life on earth was direct proof that God is with us all the time. During his ministry on earth, Jesus said something similar to God's promise in Isaiah. He said, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." Jesus didn't shy away from the fact that we will face troubling times in this life, but he told us to take heart, to have courage and remain strong, because he has overcome the world. In other words, we can stay rooted in the fact that there is no change or trouble so big that God can't take care of it. He's made the promise to never leave us and to never forsake us. He's made the promise to be with us. And when we're rooted in the truth of that promise, we can find the courage to face any difficult challenge or circumstance. So what does it mean for us to do as Jesus said and take heart in the midst of change? What does it mean to stay rooted in the promise that God is with us? Well, I think it means making a decision. First, you have to choose to simply make a decision. You have to choose to make a decision to trust God in the middle of your difficult situation. You have to trust that this situation didn't take God by surprise, and you have to trust that God is with you. And then you have to make one more decision, the decision to change your perspective. Choose to believe that God's promise of being with you is bigger and better than anything else he could do. Choose to believe that his presence will help you and will help get you through whatever it is that you're going through right now. Choose to believe that his presence can keep you rooted through whatever changes you're facing. Remember, God is with you, and that promise can carry you through any seemingly broken situation in your life. As we wrap up for tonight, I want you to think about this question. What is one thing I wish God would fix in my life right now?